Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam kavibiriditam kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhavirnantiye Budita Janaha. Thy words of immortality, adored by the sages, auspicious to hear, removes the miseries of life, destroys sins. Those who spread thy words, O Lord, are the greatest benefactors of this world. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The last class in the introduction, we had spoken about the first meeting of him, the recorder of the Gospel, with Sri Ramakrishna. We had also spoken how the very essence of scriptural knowledge is presented by Sri Ramakrishna in a very, can say, simple way. He says, if you, when hearing the name of Hari or Rama, once you shed tears and your hair stands on end, then you know for certain that you do not have to perform such devotions as Sandhya, etc. anymore. Some of the signs enumerated are called the 8 Sattvika Bhavas. That is the very pure devotional, you can say, signs that are manifest in the body. And one of them is, two of them, as Sri Ramakrishna has pointed out, is hearing the name, you shed tears and your hair stands on end. Of course, these things are common to other emotions also. So you have got to be careful that, this is not the same as those ordinary emotions. These are spontaneous emotions due to an excess of sattva guna. That is, when the material of your body and the mind has become exceedingly pure, these spontaneously arise. And as we have said, that he came back and he says, we are on the page 77, those who are following it on the book there at home, said, M looked around with wonder and said to himself, what a beautiful place, what a charming man, how beautiful his words are. I have no wish to move from this spot. After a few minutes, he thought, let me see the place first, and then I'll come back and sit down. Now, this is a paradox. He says, I don't wish to move from this spot, and then he says, let me go around and see the place, and then I'll come back. Well, but he appreciates the ambience there, the words, Sri Ramakrishna. There are many people who won't appreciate it. Their minds are not tuned on that level. It's obvious that you have to have some basic spiritual inclination for that mind to feel attracted to spiritual verities, spiritual truths, spiritual conversations. You can understand, if you start playing rock music, you will get a horde of people running there. But when you speak about the reality and truth, you will get a few. Those impressions are not present in those people. They are, but not to the degree where you start appreciating spiritual talk. spiritual words, and everything you hear kinds of is fulfilling. You must understand that, like we have food which is meant for the body, there is something called food of the mind also. And there is a food for the soul. These things are food for the soul and the intellect and the mind, of course. So they become kind of fulfilling. And that's the reason why he's saying, what a charming, what a beautiful place, what a charming man, how beautiful words are. Everybody cannot be saying this. It's not a simple appreciation of ordinary beauty. There's something deep inside that is drawing this person's mind, M's mind. As he left the room with Sidhu, he heard the sweet music of the evening service rising in the temple from gong, bell, drums, and cymbal. Now, this is Vesper's services that are going on in the temple, and especially in a temple of Kali, in the Vesper services, you have a lot of, you can say, noise, gong and bell and cymbal and drums. And this is a kind of a hallmark of Kali worship. Lot of noise, lot of sound. So that was the main temple there, Kali's temple. And then he could hear the music from the Naha, but there was a music tower. The musicians should sit down in one place and play the music. Generally, it's called the ragas, which are played during the evenings, and devotional tunes. So they used to play it on their pipes and on the drums, etc. The sound traveled over the Ganges, floating away and losing themselves in the distance. So here it is, a soft spring wind was blowing, laden with the fragrance of flowers. The moon had just appeared. It was as if nature and man together were preparing for the evening worship. This is what clinches it. During the time when day passes into night, there is a period of relative calmness in nature. And that's the reason why we ask to meditate during those times, where you can take the help of nature's calmness, which is reflected in your body and mind. So Sri Ramakrishna he used to see, because in those days he never had a wristwatch. So he would check if he could still see the hair on his hands, and then judge, oh, it's getting dark, it's evening now. And he used to put everything aside and meditate on God. So M and Sidhu visited the 12 Shiva temples, the Radhakanta temples and the temple of Bhavatarani. So here they were going around the temples, and those Shiva temples, they're all in a row, and they are so, you can say, imposing. So there was worship going on in all the temples. Radhakanta is Shiva, and Bhavatarani is Kali. Kali is called Bhavatarani. One, Tarini is one who helps cross Bhava, the ocean of samsara, the ocean of birth and death. That is what is called Bhavatarani, one who helps us cross the ocean of birth and death. As M watched the services before the images, his heart was filled with joy. And then he returned to Sri Ramakrishna's room, and then there is a small description about who was a proprietor and when it was built, etc. And how were they doing philanthropic activities, how charitable they were. And then he says, M, who had just come on his first visit, he saw the door closed of Sri Ramakrishna's room and asked a maidservant who was standing outside, is the holy man in? Brinde, the maid servant, replied, yes, he is in his room. M. How long has he lived here? Brinde. Oh, he has been here a long time. Yeah, he spent more than 25 years in Dakshineshwar, but he never lived all his life in Dakshineshwar in this particular room. He used to live in another room, which was a small room assigned in one of the owners, you can say, quarters, Kutibadi. Because his nephew had passed away, he didn't want to stay in that building anymore. So he came to this present building and this present room. Then he said, M. Does he read many books? Brinde. Books? Oh dear, no. They are all on his tongue. That is, they all, as I say, M had just finished studies in college. It amazed him to learn that Sri Ramakrishna read no books. This is the problem with us, all of us. We like some person who is articulate and a person can speak in tones, in volumes. Sri Ramakrishna never needed to read books because he was speaking through experiences. He saw God and he was speaking about it. There are two types of books, philosophical books. One is the deliberative. They go around in circles. They ask questions and they try to answer those questions. Is there a God or is there no God? What is existence? What is reality? What is truth? Etc. etc. How does perception work? How does cognition occur? Where? All these books are there. These are the Vada, the deliberative, the speculative. And there are the other types of books called the Siddhanta, the I say conclusive. One of the books of this class is this Gospel. It's conclusive. The words are coming directly to you, not going through some kind of logical processes and using examples, comparing this with that, etc. No, they come straight at you. That is the appeal of the Gospel. It comes from words that have been experienced. Sri Ramakrishna says, I have seen God. And he says, this is what it is. So M was a little surprised, as I say. M. Perhaps it is time for his evening worship. May we go into his room? Will you tell him we are anxious to see him? Brinde, the maid servant, says, go right in, children. Go in and sit down. So they go in, and entering the room, they found Sri Ramakrishna alone, seated on the wooden couch. He had a bedstead and a small wooden couch beside it. He used to sit down there when he saying incense had just been burnt and all the doors were shut. Now people wonder, incense has been burnt and the doors are shut. As it is evening in those areas in Bengal, it was malarial, and in the evening there's a whole swarm of mosquitoes trying to enter. So they used to close the doors and windows. The moment it's dusk, close the doors and windows, and you burn incense, and that smoke itself drove away any remaining ones out. So people say, why did Sri Ramakrishna sit down in an incense-filled room with his doors closed? This is the reason. Malaria. As M entered with folded hands, saluted the master. Then at the master's bidding, he and Sidhu sat on the floor. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, where do you live? What's your occupation? Why have you come to Baranagar? And we will see later, M lived in Calcutta and he was a school teacher, and he had come to Baranagar because he had relatives there. M answered the question, but he noticed now and then that the master seemed to become absent-minded. Here it is. Later he learned that this mood is called Bhav, ecstasy. It's not just pure ecstasy, it's more than ecstasy. It is getting into a different state of mind. This state of mind has come through long spiritual disciplines. This state comes when bhakti and jnana, knowledge, has become mature. In this state, you transcend the ordinary world. In this state, there is an, you can say, a burst of bliss. In this state, you can be directly in touch with the psychic and the spiritual realms that are in the universe. Those realms are right now close to us because we see this world through these senses and this mind and these eyes. In that state, when the mind goes deep within itself, it enters into a higher aspect of the mind. So we have the subconsciousness, we have a layer on that subconscious called the conscious. Yes, it's a thin film. Shiram, Swami Vivekananda says it's a thin film between the subconscious and the superconscious. We think this whole world and we and everything are so important and so great and everything belongs to us and we know everything. It's just a thin film of consciousness above these two oceans. For illustrative purposes, think of the waves on this ocean, Pacific Ocean, as the conscious layer. The waters, deep waters, are the subconscious layers, and the sky above the waves is the higher mind, the super consciousness. Bhava is this. It rises up, it doesn't go down. There's a lot of mistake between going down in the subconsciousness and going up in the super consciousness. In both places, however, Swami Vivekananda is very clear, the sense of I has changed. It's different. The sense of I, that the solid I, that with the identity, etc., which is on the conscious layer, it gets modified or it's transformed. It's only when that I, that identity, personal identity is kind of diluted, it gets enlarged, then can you rise into this higher mind, super mind. When the mind goes down into the subconsciousness, there's a hazy, you can say, idea of the personal identity. As we've seen, you see yourself in dream. If you see yourself in dream, you see yourself as something different at times. So the personal identity is kind of dissolved in this higher mind, and that's where one can enter into. So he used to appear absent-minded now and then, and that's why you're saying that, later he noticed that he learned that his mood is called Bhav, ecstasy. And now M gives an example, rather an illustration, which he had later heard from Sri Ramakrishna himself, which he uses it to describe the state. It's like the state of an angler who had been sitting with his rod. The fish comes and swallows the bait, and the float begins to tremble. The angler is on the alert. He grips the rod and watches the float, steadily and eagerly. He will not speak to anyone. Such was the state of Sri Ramakrishna's mind. Of course, when you are deep in thought or contemplative, you don't like to talk, because talking disturbs the mind. It's in silence. And the silence has become so natural, it has become deep. The mind itself is plumbing its own depths, and then your senses automatically stop. Absent-mindedness appears like absent-mindedness. In absent-mindedness, suppose I'm looking at this, and then another thought, a powerful thought or a stronger thought comes in my mind, and I'm looking at this, but I'm not really looking at this. My mind has been occupied with something else. In this state, in the spiritual sense, the senses become controlled, and that's why you can't talk. And if you are seeing, you're all seeing it through that higher mind. So the world appears different, and it's only when the senses are arrested, when the mind's energies that flow through the senses have been curbed, pulled back in, then can you enter into this state. Otherwise, it's not possible. Remember, it's not a trance. A trance is different from this state. This state comes through a disciplined, a long disciplined, you can say, practice of a particular aspect of yoga. In a trance, you lose at times consciousness, and you get to see all fancy things. So this is the state of Bhav. Later M heard and himself noted that Sri Ramakrishna would often go into this mood after dusk, sometimes becoming totally unconscious of the outer world. This is what it is. You are not conscious of the outer world. You are not conscious of your body. And only then you can go into the state of Bhava. It's also called Bhava Samadhi. So this state rises within one, and you lose consciousness, because you cannot hold two things together. In your consciousness, you cannot hold on to the consciousness of your body as well as rise to the higher mind. You will have to let one go and hold on to the other. Sri Ramakrishna is kind of still in ecstasy. M says, perhaps you want to perform your evening worship. In that case, maybe take your leave. Here it is. In the evenings, we are asked to sit down and meditate, etc. Do your daily devotions, worship. Sri Ramakrishna, no. Evening worship? No. It is not exactly like that. Because Sri Ramakrishna had attained that state of perfection. It is not a state of practice, not sadhana, not the one that he has to do a regular discipline to reach that state. He has already reached that state. We are doing spiritual practices because we have not yet reached that particular destination. And in that state, the entire life is one long, you can say, experience of different aspects of Godhead. That person does not have to do a regular, but he or she, they will at times sit down and practice just to set an example. Otherwise, they will say, oh my God, this guy is loitering about when it's time for meditation. So, in order to set an example, as the Bhagavad Gita also said, yad yada charati shrestha, like these great people or those people who are, you can say, adored or venerated by others, whatever they do is emulated by others. So, in order to set an example, they would not like to rock the boat, because otherwise they'll have to give long winded explanations why they are not sitting for meditation. So, it's better to sit down for meditation. The next is, their entire life was spent in the spiritual disciplines. The body goes under the force of habit. If you're going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get up next day 7 o'clock in the morning, and after some time it becomes a habit. You are going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then you need an alarm clock to wake you up at 6 o'clock. So, why is that? The mind also functions on the line of least resistance, because it wants to conserve energy. It is a, you can say, slave of habits. As a result, what happens is, if this person has been meditating in the evenings or in the mornings and the afternoon and at night, the body will follow those habits, old habits. So, here also he says, well, no, it's not exactly like that. So, he is not doing it to attain perfection. He is doing it out of a habit, out of a need to set an example for others, etc. After a little conversation, M saluted the master and took his leave. On his way home, Sri Ramakrishna said, come again. M began to wonder, who is this serene looking man who is drawing me back to him? Is it possible for a man to be great without being a scholar? Yeah, again it is. And Sri Ramakrishna, one of his teachings is, you know what's a sign of knowledge? That person will not even have one single book with him. And imagine, like, we all have a whole library of books. And then Sri Ramakrishna relented. Okay, you can keep the Bhagavad Gita. That's okay. Why? Because this person has internalized it. You know, when you study books, you read books, etc., after a while, you imbibe those ideas, you internalize those ideas. And after that, when you practice spiritual disciplines, you need to have the direct experience, and then the books are useless. Sri Ramakrishna also gives another example. A man is frantically searching for a letter which he has lost. Somebody had written to him, a note rather. And his friends joined him, and they all search around, and they finally find a note. And what was read in the note? Oh, get some clothes and get some sweets. He takes that, crumples that paper and throws it out. He goes to the market, gets those clothes and sweets, and come back. That letter, that note has got no uses. So, books in that state are useless. Why? Because you already know what was in the books. Sri Ramakrishna was also called a Paramahamsa. That is, one who has, this world is a mixture of reality and unreality. It's always there. Everything has a fine blend of reality and unreality. The world is real, at the same time unreal. We see things and yet they are not there. A Paramahamsa is one who has separated the unreality from the reality and dwells in the reality. That is the meaning of the word Paramahamsa, the highest, you can say, monks are called Paramahansa. While we get enmeshed, we take the real for the unreal and the unreal for the real, and we run around in circles. This is what the difference between us and people like Sri Ramakrishna. We dedicate time and energy and life to certain pursuits and finally find that has nothing but given me more and more pain. And after I acquire it, I find it useless. It's kind of running in the desert, looking at the mirage, the lake out there. And the more you go towards it, it vanishes. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna was. He never needed to have books because he has reached that state. So M is saying, how wonderful it is. I would like to see him again. He said, come again. I shall go tomorrow or the day after. This is important. It's like a certain tug, a certain connection is formed with a place, with a person, with a thing, and that kind of draws you to that. Blessed are those who get connected with spirituality. If they go out in a place where they cannot consolidate that connection, they feel like a fish out of water. They put somebody in a different environment, and they feel like a fish out of water. They like to be in a place where that connection is validated, that connection is enhanced. That's why when devotees meet other devotees, they speak about divine things, about God. Why? And that's also one of the signs and one of the practices. Tat chintanam, tat katanam. Speak about that. Listen to that and enlighten each other regarding that. That is reality. And the more you can do that, it's like, another example given, sandalwood. When you take sandalwood and you keep on rubbing for the sandalwood paste, the more you rub, the more fragrance comes out. So the more you start validating your connection with the divine, the more fragrant life becomes. And this is how slowly we increase our knowledge of ourselves. See, like last time I was telling you in the introduction, this book is not something about somebody else. You will find it is speaking about yourself. Myself, not what you do in your day-to-day life, but speaking to you about your deeper inner self. And you will find your connection with Sri Ramakrishna, with this book, with the scripture, and slowly you will internalize it. We stop here for questions if there are. So those who would like to put some questions. Okay, there are thank yous. If there are no questions, I think we can. Oh, there are. There's a 20-second gap. Could you explain a little more the difference between the tears Sri Ramakrishna asks us to have yearning for God and the ordinary emotional tears? Oh, thank you, David. Sri Ramakrishna says, tears of devotion, bhakti, they come out from the corners of your eye, outer corners of your eye. And ordinary tears come from from the from these corners of the eye. I think that is clear. So tears of, you say, devotion, they fall from the outer corners of the eye, and ordinary. Okay, and yeah, so it's always necessary to understand that sometimes these high spiritual moods and their manifestation on the body sometimes mimic ordinary emotions. So we've got to be careful. When Sri Ramakrishna was weeping for the Divine Mother's vision, terribly, that is anguish, people used to see him rolling on the ground, and they used to think maybe he's got colic pain, maybe he misses his mother. So various things. So we like to go according to the external signs, but there are those enumerated exactly in the scriptures which tell you that these are spiritual signs that are running through the body, and that is why you've got to be careful in pinning down what exactly are these. Oh, thank you, Bhavani, after a long time. Thank you, thank you. Okay, that's good. So those tears come from the state of bhava? Yes. The spiritual tears come from the state of bhava. And at times Sri Ramakrishna used to, the state used to bring so much tears out, his shirt used to be soaked. Yeah, there's a constant kind of upsurge of that spiritual emotion. His shirt used to be soaked. Okay, I think we can. And Friday, 7 p.m., we'll have the second part of the great spiritual giant, Gopala's mother. Yes, we'll take the astounding Gopala's mother. She was really astounding, and people should know about this great soul. She has created a history, a spiritual history, with a life and her visions of God. And Sunday, of course, we have Vedanta, its practicality, at 10 a.m. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Thank you very much. So, do you have any questions here? Yeah, these are very kind of straightforward things.